Hi, and welcome to Allaire Village. My name is Denis, and I thought we'd start here showing you where the iron was produced. This piece of rock is about 30% iron. It's called bog iron, and it was taken from this large bog that sits behind me. So now we're at the blast furnace where they would actually produce the iron. They would combine the bog iron that we talked about over there with charcoal and a flux to produce liquid iron. Now, originally, there was a large building that housed the furnace. That structure has been there since about 1795, and one of the main reasons that Mr. Allaire bought the property in 1822 was to have access to this iron in that furnace. As I mentioned, they would combine the materials in the furnace, light that up, and when the temperature got to be about 2,400 Fahrenheit, every 12 hours they would punch a hole down here and out would flow molten iron into these trenches that resembled a large sow feeding her pigs. That's why they call it pig iron. Now we call this a blast furnace because in order for the process to work, they would have to blast air into it, and the air came from a water wheel powered bellows system, and these rods here were the controls to control the amount of air that went into the mixture. Now we're at the general store, and I want you to pay close attention to these sills and lintels near the windows. These are made of cast iron that was produced in the blast furnace and set in place in 1835. I also want you to pay particular attention to those black stars. We're going to talk about them more in the carpenter shop. Welcome to the carpenter shop. Now, back in 1835, the carpenter did not make buildings, did not make furniture. He was a pattern maker. Now, the best way to explain that, if you remember the black stars on the general store, they were cast iron. Now, back then, you couldn't make them out of iron straight away. You would come to the carpenter shop, and a carpenter would make a wooden model like this star. Remember, in 1835, there is no electricity, so all of this would have been made by hand. Once the model or pattern is made, it was taken down near the blast furnace. They had a large casting area where they would put the pattern in a sand mold like this, get a nice pattern in the sand, and then when that was ready, they would pour some of that liquid iron into that, and once it was cooled, out would come the finished product. Now, that's pretty simple. Here's another product that was made. It's an old-fashioned iron. Now, the base of the iron was cast, and the way they would do that was make a wooden model like the star, cast it in the sandbox, and once it was ready, the blacksmith would make a handle like this, and they would combine it, and there you go, the handle to the iron. Now, a lot of people say that this is an old process. I would venture to say that it's also a very modern process. Everyone has one of these in their kitchen, a cast iron skillet, but what you have is the copy. This is the original. This is how they're made today. A wooden model is made, cast the same as a star, same as the iron, and that's how you make a cast iron skillet. Now, 25% of the iron that was produced here was used on the site to make window lintels and sills and irons and frying pans, and 75% was shipped to its main operation in New York, making steam boilers. So a very important part of the operation here was making and repairing wagon wheels. The first part of making the wheel was making the spoke, and I want to share this piece of equipment with you. It's called a shaving horse. Horse was going to sit on it like a horse. And originally you start off with a square piece of wood. You would put it in this vise, step on the brake down here, hold that nice and tight, and using this drawing knife, slowly shave the piece of wood to whatever form you want it. Welcome to the wheelwright shop. Now we're going to talk about how we would put together this wheel. It was all handmade. This is 1835 vintage. We talked about in the main carpenter shop how we made the spoke. Now we're going to talk about how we put the whole wheel together. So the first part of making the wheel is this hub. Is take a piece of log like this, and we'd hire some young lad whose job would be to turn this wheel all day long. Any takers? And the other operator would use this special knife to cut the log and shape it into the hub. The next part of the job was to cut by hand 14 of these mortises in a hub into which the spokes would fit. Remember, this is all handmade. Now, once that's done, they would take, these are called fellies. They would assemble these around the wheel, and then they would take that setup outside and carefully lay the whole thing on the ground, and where they're going to install the metal band. See? The blacksmith would take a piece of straight iron, heat it and bend it and weld it, and then bring it to the wheelwright shop where they would fit it. But wait a minute, it's too small, it doesn't fit. Did somebody make a mistake? No, what they would do is they would set the whole wheel over a series of hot buckets full of hot coals, and the metal would expand just enough to fit over the wheel. Then they would take buckets of cold water and throw that on the metal, and then the metal would shrink. So that action ties the whole wheel together. This is why this thing is called a tire. Thank you very much for watching the video. We'd like you to come back to see us when we're open, and I want to remind you that Allaire Village is a 501c3 charitable organization, and we appreciate your support. Thank you.